the last year before Purim, and I think I'll send a link with the dinim for of the dinim in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, so the Olam could look on either with if you have a hard copy or via this link.
Do the Bistritskis or no?
Huh?
You think Bistritskis one with
Um, they're all the same siman, so it all goes by the original simanim. You could use Bistritsky's. Any Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is good. There's no there's no Alter Rebbe on these simanim, and all this Kitzur Shulchan Aruch go with the same original simanim. So we'll start with Simin Kuf Mem, which is actually the Seder of the Daled Parshias. By Gimel Sifim, we started last week already. We uh to Shabbosim ago, we started Shabbos. We had Parsha Shkolim, so we started the four Parshias. So we see here in Kuf Mem Sif Aleph, in Kuf Aleph, it says Shabbos Lifnei Reish Chodesh Adar Hasamach Nisin Hu Shabbos Parsha Shkolim. Always the Shabbos before Reish Chodesh Adar is when we read Parsha Shkolim. Reason being, V'imchal Reish Chodesh Shabbos Azai Hu Shabbos Shkolim. The reason is because it used to be that on Aleph Adar in the times of the Beis Hamikdash is when they were machriz that we should bring the karbanis, the machzah shekel, to bring into the Beis Hamikdash, starting from Rish Chodesh Adar is when they would be machriz. Today, the way we do that as zeicher to that is by the Shabbos prior to Rish Chodesh Adar, we read Parshas Shkolim. Now, if Rish Chodesh falls on the Shabbos, which it didn't this year, Mitzin Gimel Sifrei Torah, we would have taken out 3 Sifrei Torah because it's Shabbos, it's Rish Chodesh, and it's Parshas Shkolim.
did last year? I
Huh?
think it did last year.
Right. Berishin Koyin Shisha Parshas Shua. In the first Sefer Torah, you would have read the first 6 aliyahs from the parsha, completing the entire parsha with 6 aliyahs. B'sheni, the second Sefer Torah, Karin Shvi, would be Rish Chodesh. U'maschilim b'yem Shabbos, we start from the part that says by Rish Chodesh Kriya b'yem Shabbos. V'oimer Chatzi Kaddish, we say Chatzi Kaddish. And the Mishlishi, the third Sefer Torah, Karin Maftir b'Parsha Shkolim, and always the Haftarah is based on the last Sefer Torah. Maftirin Haftarah Shkolim. The Haftarah is Shkolim. So basically, Tamid Tadir V'she'enei Tadir Koidem. So we do first Shabbos, Kriya of Shabbos, and then we do the Kriya of Rish Chodesh, which comes 12 times a year, and then Parsha Shkolim, which only comes once a year. So that's why it's in that Seder. And the Haftarah is always following the last Sefer that you read. In Tol, what happens if you made a mistake? V'schil likres tchila Parsha Shkolim. You first read Parsha Shkolim. Goymin, you complete it. You don't stop in the middle. V'hamafter Kodesh Rish Chodesh. Then the maftir will read Rish Chodesh. Meaning, what happens? You read the parsha, so everyone knows the parsha the Shavuot comes first. But the Gabbai made a mistake about Korah between Shkolim and Rish Chodesh, where instead of reading Shkolim last, he read Rish Chodesh before last. So it was Parsha Shavuot, Shkolim, and the third Sefer Torah read Rish Chodesh. It was out of order. So when you're doing that, in middle of Rish Chodesh, middle of Parsha Shkolim, you chapsich, you were supposed to be Rish Chodesh, you don't stop, you continue reading. And since in the third Sefer Torah you're going to be Rish Chodesh, actually the maftir, Koyre b'shal Rish Chodesh, you take a read Rish Chodesh in the third Sefer Torah. And when you do the Haftarah, Gam Kein Haftarah Shabbos Chodesh. You also then will do an Haftarah. You would also read the Shabbos Haftarah and the Rish Chodesh Haftarah as well. Meaning you won't read Parsha Shkolim as your Haftarah. You're going to read Parsha Haftarah of Shabbos and Rish Chodesh. Now, what's negaya to us is Sif Beis Shabbos Shalifnei Purim. Who Shabbos Parsha Zacher. This Shabbos, upcoming Shabbos, the Shabbos prior to Purim, is what's always Parsha Zacher. So it never changes. Shabbos before Rish Chodesh Adar is always Shabbos Parsha Shkolim. Shabbos before Purim is always Zacher. Reason why Zacher is attached to the Shabbos prior to um, Purim is because Purim is all about the story how we won over Haman, who came from Amalek. So read about Amalek the Shabbos prior. That's when we're Yoitza the mitzvah of the Zecher Amalek, the Shabbos prior to Purim. Now the Shabbos Lifnei Chodesh Nisan is Shabbos Parashas HaChodesh. It's always we read about Parash of how the first Rish Chodesh came about. The Parasha of Chodesh is Elachem Rishon Hulachat She'ashana in Parashas Boi, where the very first mitzvah the Yidden were given in Mitzrayim was the idea of Kiddush HaChodesh. And so we read that before Rish Chodesh Nisan because Rish Chodesh Nisan was the first Rish Chodesh of history, was Rish Chodesh Nisan. The months start from Rish Chodesh Nisan. V'mchal Rish Chodesh b'Shabbos, also Chodesh. If the Rish Chodesh is on Shabbos, then that actual Shabbos you read Parsha Chodesh, and it has all the same dinim like we read earlier when I read Chodesh other Chal Shabbos like by Parsha Shkolim. Same dinim, and you would read three Sifrei Torah. You read the Parshas HaShavua, you read Rish Chodesh, and you read the Parshas HaChodesh from Parshas Boi, and then you would be Mafter the Haftarah, which is connected to Parshas HaChodesh. Vashabbos Shefnei Parshas HaChodesh, Shabbos Parshas Parah. It always comes that the Shabbos prior Shabbos HaChodesh is Parshas Parah. Sometimes you have a week in between, but it's always prior to Parshas Parah, to Parshas HaChodesh. You read a Parshas Parah, which is about becoming Tahir from Tumas Meis, since we're coming up before Pesach time, and that time people would be matar themselves to bring the current Pesach Batara. So we also read the Parshas Parah as zecher to that. Siv Gimel Yesh Oimim Ki Parshas Zachar Parshas Parah Chayavim Lekrois Midaraisa. Some say you have to read these Parshias Min HaTorah. Vein Koyim Kotten Lamaftir. You're not allowed to call a cotton for maftir for Parshas Zachar or Parshas Parah. You can't have a cotton. Normally, a pi halacha for maftir, you're always allowed to call up a cotton. It's not our minig lamaisa to do it, but you're allowed minadin to call up a cotton from maftir. Since maftir is not part of the seven aliyahs, so maftir is after the seven aliyahs is a kaddish, and then we read maftir. So the maftir minadin you can give to someone who's not bar mitzvah. You can give it to a child to read the maftir. But however, on these parshias, a parshas para, parshas zacher, one should not do that because then, uh, you're talking about something which is chayiv min haTorah, so that's why it should not be done. Um, I believe there is something from the Alter Rebbe here on this din. I'm just trying to pull it up. I think he does mention this din about a cotton. Um, So actually, what's interesting that the Alter Rebbe disagrees with this, with this Nakuda, and I'm going to put it up over here. I'm going to see if I can put it up on the Zoom, Zoom chat. I didn't. It didn't go over well. I'm gonna send a link. You have over here a link to the Siman, and the the Sif over here is in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. It's the ending of Sif Tes Vav. So Sif Tes Vav. This is in Hilchos Shabbos, and I'm sorry, it's Sif Tes Zayin. Sif Tes Zayin. The Alter Rebbe says here in Simon Reish Pei Beis that Katan Hayidei Lemim Avarich, and if a child knows who he is benching, who he's saying a bracha to, Yachol Alas Maftir, allowed to get a Lila Maftir. Ein Tzarich Lein V'Shabbos Maftir Ein El Choyz Okeim Hashkar Shvi. There's no chiddush that a Maftir can do this in a regular week. You're allowed to give it to a Katan because the Maftir is just repeating what the Shvi already read. So there's nothing new there, so it's okay for a Katan to read. But the chiddush is Afilu Parshas and Musafim Rish Chodesh Chabash Avdala Parshas Yochol Lalis V'Miteilim Mimavarchim. He says Hayos that the chiddush that a cotton cream after is even the dal parshias when the mafter is not repeating the parshas of Shavuot, he's saying something new, whether it's Yom Tif and he's saying the or Reish Chodesh or dal parshias. Yachalas yadelim mimavarch. Now the ending of Sifta Zayin, Al Pi Shaparsha Zachar Chayim and Atorah Shishmena called him Yisrael. L'chayra Parsha Zachar is a Chayim and Atorah, everyone to hear. V'katan shein mechuyev der ein yachol yitzin dei chavasan. Kol makim achshav eshvir tzibah koyde v'karam hashmir l'tzibah mitzin dei chavasan. Now that these days the Shliach Tzibur reads, it used to be in the times of the Gemara that the there wasn't a Baal Koida. Everyone who got an Aliyah, they themselves read the Kriya. However, it became a time when not everyone knew the Kriya, and it was embarrassing for someone to be called up and they did not know the Kriya. So it became a takana that we have a Baal Koida. No one reads in the Baal Koida lanes, and the person who gets called up is Yaitza because he hears the Baal Koida, and he makes brachas on the Baal Koida's Kriya. Midin Shemea Ka'ina. So says the Alter Rebbe, this din that a katan is not allowed to read Parsha Zachar, the Haftarah is only when the katan actually read it. However, if the Baal Koyer is reading it, you're not being Yaitza from the katan. And the Baal Koyer is a gadol. And therefore, even the Dala Parshi is the Alter Rebbe will be Mekel, unlike we learned in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which seems to be Dafke in a Zman when there was no Baal Koyer, this din. Yeah. Now, weiter in the Sif Gimel, and we're back to Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the original link, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. So in Simin Kuf Mem Sif Gimel, we said that some say that Parsha Zachar, Parsha Parah Chayavim in Torah, and Ein Koyim Katan Lamaftir. And furthermore, Bnei Yishuv and Shem Lamin Tzrichin Shivay Lamakshishmin. There are many people lived in Shtetlach, around, not in the big city, but in outlying Shtetlach that did not have a minyan. So the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says those people have to come for Shabbos. They have to come over and stay in the shul in the city. because they have no minyan after they hear Parsha Zachar. If they can't make it into the big city for Shabbos, they should at least read it. Beneginis Karai means with trap. Take out a chumash and read it with trap inside the chumash. Do your best, what you could do if you're not able to be in, you don't have a minyan, which, by the way, could happen to people out there in shluchis in different Chabad houses if they don't have a minyan. So that would be what they would be doing. They'd be taking out a chumash and reading it with trap inside. I just want to point out something that's not brought down here, but the Mishabruda in the Mishabruda on Hilchos Purim and these dinim says that if someone can't, he brings the Magen Avraham actually. The Magen Avraham says a chiddush, and the Magen Avraham says that if you are unable to make it the Parashat Zachar, you didn't make it to shul, have in mind on Purim day. Before we read the Megillah, we read Kriyas HaTorah on Purim, the Kriyas from Parshas Beshalach, which discusses how Amalek came to fight the Yidden and Moshe sent Yeshua, Mechalanu Anashim, Mitzei Lochem Amalek to fight Amalek, and Moshe and Aaron and Chor fasted, and Moshe sat on a rock and they lifted up his hands and they won the war. Now, the Magen Avraham says someone who did not hear Parsha Zachar, which by the way is found in Parsha, the ending of Parsha Kiseitze, should have in mind on Purim Day to be Yoitza from the Kriya, which is from Parsha Beshalach, and you're also Yoitza, the mitzvah, Min HaTorah of Parshas Zachar via Parshas Beshalach. Meaning, in other words, there are two parshas in the Torah that discuss Amalek. One is the ending of Parsha Beshalach, and one is the ending of Parshas Kiseitze. And we read Parshas Kiseitze as the one for Parsha Zachar, and on Purim Day we read before Megillah Parshas Beshalach. And the Magen Avraham says, "B'diavad you can learn on Purim Parshas Beshalach and be Yoitza." So that's what many women do. Women that want to be Yoitza, and they're not in shul on Parshas Zachar, or for some reason a man. And on Purim Day, they'll come to shul and make sure they hear Parshat Beshalach. That's the Magen Avraham's chiddush. The Mishabura questions this. Mishabura has an issue with this because the Mishabura feels that Parshat Beshalach is the incorrect parsha. L'chayda, he asks, l'chayda to be yoytz of the mitzvah. Why? Parsha Zachar, we always read the parts and the psukim at the ending of Parshas Kiseitze. In the ending of Parshas Kiseitze, the psukim there talk about how remember what Amalek did to you, don't forget, and erase the name of Amalek. That's what it says in the ending of Parshas Kiseitze. The ending of Parshas Beshalach, it says a story how Amalek came to attack us after we left Mitzrayim, and Moshe said Yeshua should choose men to go fight with Amalek, and with Moshe and Aaron and Chor fasting and sitting on the rock, and how they won the war. Says the Mishabura, I don't understand you, Magen Avraham. When we have to be yoitz to the mitzvah of Amalek, of remembering what Amalek did, we have to read what we read the parsha before, which we're going to read this upcoming Shabbos, Parsha Kiseitze, which tells us about remembering what Amalek did, Zachar, Al Tishkach, Machi Timcha Zecha Amalek, about erasing them, like all the mitzvahs, 3 mitzvahs. Remembering what Amalek did is not forgetting, so the mitzvah Aseh and Alois Aseh, and then there's a third mitzvah, mitzvah Aseh, Machi Timcha Zecha Amalek, to wipe out Amalek. Now, 3 mitzvahs. So the Mishabura, you have to read that. You have to read about the mitzvahs, and that's the way you yoytz to the mitzvah. So he doesn't understand the Magen Avraham, his allowance that you can be yoytza somehow on Purim Day from Parsha Beshalach. Parsha Beshalach doesn't at all mention the mitzvahs. All these mitzvahs that you're mechuyev. So I think we one time discussed it, but my own pshat over here is, this is again my own pshat, that the pshat in the Magen Avraham is like this. Really, what's the problem with the ending of Parashat B'Shalach? The ending of Parashat B'Shalach discusses the story of what Amalek did to us. Well, that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be remembering what Amalek did to us. In fact, in Parashat B'Shalach, and the ending is like makes more sense in a certain way that we should be reading, because there Mamish discusses what Amalek did to us when we left Mitzrayim, and no, every nation was afraid of us, and Amalek went out there to fight us. So that is what we need to be seemingly reading. Why should I be Yoitza with reading about what Amalek did? Because that's what we're supposed to remember what Amalek did. The other in Parashat Kiseitze, it's a little harder to understand how it could be Yoitza. Over there it says it's a mitzvah to remember what Amalek did. Don't forget what Amalek did. Erase him. Amalek doesn't tell us what Amalek did to us. There's no mention of what Amalek did to us. The main story, what Amalek did to us, is in Parashat B'Shalach. In Parashat Kiseitze, it's very bekitzer. Very, very bekitzer. I'll call upon him, al pizeh l'choyda, we can be yashiv, why the Magen Avraham held you could be yoitza reading the part, the psukim in the ending of Parashat B'Shalach. But though, just to clarify, there are only two parashas in the entire Torah that discuss Amalek. The ending of Parashat B'Shalach and the ending of Parashat Kiseitze. Our minig is the Shabbos prior to Purim, which is the upcoming Shabbos, Parashat Zachar. We read the psukim in the ending of Kiseitze. On Purim Day, we read the ending of B'Shalach, and those are the portions that mention Amalek. Now, moving on to the next siman. Again, we have the link here for those who don't have a hard copy of the Kitzer. The first link in the chat box where we have a link to siman. It was originally siman kuf mem aleph. We're moving down to the next siman, to siman kuf mem aleph. Mishenichnes oder marbim be simcha. So the Gemara explains when Adar enters, we increase in simcha. B'Yisrael shishitinu dvarim em oivikcha mazalis em akum ishpetem v'cherizeh. A yid who has a din Torah should have it with him in this month with a guy I'm not a din Torah, I'm sorry, a court case. He has a court case with an Ovid Kichel Mazalis, should have it after this month because it has a very healthy mazel for Klal Yisrael. Based on what happened to us in the past, this is a very good month for Yidden to have Yeshua's salvations. So try to push it off to this Chodesh. Just resending the link with the siman for those who have difficulty finding it. Esther Nikolai Yehudim Mishloish also the Chodesh Adar Lamed al Nafshim in Dakim Eveim. The Yidden stood up days of Esther, Mordechai and Esther, just to fight their enemies. It was on the 13th day of Adar. Vayitzich and Lavakish Rachem Es Hashem Yizbosh Yaz and needed to daven to Hashem. Umatzinu Shahoyi Yisrael b'Melchames Anu Shiyaz Hashem. We find that we Yidden went to war. They fasted that Hashem should help them. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu fought Amalek. He fasted. Was probably those days in Mordechai they fasted on the 13th day of Adar. Therefore, Klal Yisrael accepted upon themselves that the day before Purim we fast. Because remember, Purim, by the way, is on Yud Dalet Adar, right? Upcoming Tuesday. I'm sorry, in next week Tuesday. Now, Yud Gimel is Tainus Esther. Yud Gimel is the day we won over the enemies. The day when we rested was Yud Dalet. So the day that we celebrate is the day when we rested. We rested on Purim and commemorate all future generations, even though the war battle was won We want our enemies in Yigimel, but we commemorate the Zecher is Yudalit, Purim is on Yudalit. But in Yigimel, since we had the war in Yigimel, and Yidden fast when they're in a tzara, so therefore we also fast today days, commemorate the fasting then. K'nei liskar shabayis barach shema yiroye v'shemet feels called ish yisrael be'ez tzarasi. Remember that Hashem sees Yidden's tefillos. He listens to them when we're in trouble. When we fast and do tshuva, because Yisanav Yashem Chalvavi, K'moisha also v'seim yamehem, just like He did then, He could do for us today. Remember, Tanis Esther is not mentioned in any psukim, and therefore it's not strict like the other ones of Tisha B'Av, Asar B'Tevis, Tzim Gedalia, Shavasa B'Tamaz are clear in the psukim. Tanis Esther is not based on a pasuk, so therefore has a leniencies. Pregnant women, nursing women. I feel a choylak sas b'keiv even if someone is even with eyes hurt him. Shemitzayim harbe, if it's very comfortable, uncomfortable for them, it's difficult for them. They don't have to fast. Any woman that gave birth within the 30 days before, they don't need to fast. They should pay up the fast later on. And other healthy individuals should not separate themselves from the community. Even if they're traveling that day and it's difficult, they should fast, unless you're a chayla or one of these situations. Now, I want to point out, over here it says that a person should make up the tainus if they didn't fast tainus Esther for legitimate reasons. You didn't fast, you still have to make it up another day. This is how the Baal Kitzur Shana paskins. However, Lamaisa, that's not the minig. The minig is that, let's say, a woman who is prohibited from fasting. Yoel is here, right? Yoel Brief is here.
He is, yeah.
Mazel tov, Mazel tov.
Oh
Today was
yeah,
the.
yes. I am just
Also,
reading.
yeah.
Sorry.
How did you make a bris on such a day?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a serious nefesh about still.
Wow. You had a minion there?
Yeah, it was very nice. So we went to Williamsburg. We went to the Kala Rebbe. It was beautiful.
You gotta be joking. How did you get from Flatbush to Williamsburg?
I had Shimon drive me.
Oh my. Oh my.
Yeah,
Wow.
they're very nice to take me.
You were in the Shimer car.
Yeah, we went in the big SUV.
Oh wow. Your whole family.
Yeah,
Oh
took
wow.
two cars. Yeah,
And I know how to I'm back also.
back we took Uber because it was after 2 o'clock, so we were able to go back with a regular car.
What a story. You had there was a caterer that would cater?
No, I had to pay extra for somebody to bring some challahs, and the Sherman brought it over. It was a whole place.
Wow, this is like a historical bris.
Yeah.
The Kaddish might be Israel.
Aaron Sholem.
Aaron Shalom. Wow. No, Aaron was Raid of Shalom.
Yeah,
So it goes together. Wow. So the Rebbe was a Sandik?
there was Sandik, yeah.
Wow. Very
But
special.
this week's Parsha also, Tzava is Aaron's Parsha. And Moshe's name is not mentioned.
Ah, right. Wow.
No.
Wow. Baruch Hashem. A big schos. Beautiful story.
Yeah.
So listen, she doesn't have to fast. It's in the Shloshim Yom. A
Right.
Yildis doesn't have to fast.
I mean, she's Menekes also, so yeah.
Right? Shemenekis also. So you have the second
Both
heter.
ends. Yeah.
And Balagabi and repaying back the fast, the minig is not, the oil doesn't repay back fast. When the women don't fast, or chayla, they don't repay back the fast. So not like it says here. That's not the minig. And the other thing I want to point it out, we pointed out in previous years, but always important to chazer over, that Tainus Esther is not only the way the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says, it's not mentioned in the psukim. I want to make it a little more clear. It's not either mentioned anywhere Mishnayos or Gemara. There's no explicit place that Tainus Esther is mentioned in Chazal. There are, according to certain Rishonim, it's hinted out on the bottom of the first Amud of Maseches Megillah, where it says there that Yud Gimel Adar, you're allowed to read the Megillah in the villages that couldn't, that used to be the Zman of Mishnayos. They were able to read the Megillah on the first Mishnah in Maseches Megillah is Megillah Nikras, B'Yud Aleph, B'Yud Beis, B'Yud Gimel, Yud Aleph, B'Tezvav. You're allowed to read the Megillah prior dates if you need to. In villages they couldn't make it in, they read in prior dates, starting from Aleph. And the Gemara discusses how we learn out these extra dates. It don't say in the Megillah. Megillah only says Yudala Tezvav are dates for Megillah. Walled cities read in Tezvav like Shalayim does today and other walled cities. However, everyone else does Yudala Adar. It's clear in the Megillah, clear Psukim. However, where do we learn out the extra 3 dates? So the Gemara says there's a word bismaneim. It's an extra word that you're allowed to read the Megillah in their times. That comes to include an extra 2 days. Not only Yud Aleph Tezvav, you could read it Yud Aleph Yud Beis. And the Gemara asks, how do I know Yud Gimel you're allowed to read it? There's a 3rd day that you added. The Gemara says Yud Gimel doesn't need a pasuk because it's Yoim Kehil LaKoilhi. I think it's the last line on the first Amud in Maseches Megillah. It's a Yom Kehillah, it's a day of gathering for all the Klal Yisrael. So there is 2 ways how to learn this. Rashi explains that the day of gathering meant that Klal Yisrael stood up to gather together to fight their enemies. And they won. So the main Nes happened not in Yudalit. We party in Yudalit. But really the Nes happened on Yud Gimel was the Nes, when we won over the enemies. But in Yiddishkeit, we celebrate the day after when we rested from the war, from all the bloody wars. But the Nes really happened in Yud Gimel. So said the Gemara, according to Rashi's interpretation, that you don't need to add a pasuk to add Yud Gimel. It's a svara. Obviously, if the Nes happened in Yud Gimel, then in certain circumstances you can read the Megillah earlier on Yud Gimel Adar. That's how Rashi learns it. However, the Toisus brings for the Ri that Rabbi Yitzchak, he learns that Zman Kila Koili means something else. It means that Yidden gather together to fast. They gather together to daven and fast that they should tzliach and win in the war. It means they gather together to fast. So according to Toisus, the fact that we fasted in Yud Gimel Adar is actually hinted out, mentioned in the Gemara. There's a mention of it in the Gemara that they fasted at that time period. However, even according to Tosfos, there's no explicit mission of Gemara which says Chayiv Adam Lisanis B'Yud Gimel Adar. There's no such a din. There's just a Gemara that makes mention that they gathered together and fasted. Al Kol Panim, even if they did gather and fast then, we don't know any halacha that you have to fast in future times in history. So yes, indeed, Zman Kila Kol Yud Gimel, then they gathered together and fasted and they daven. But even according to Toisus, there's no remez anywhere that we now, after Purim story, have to continue fasting as a zeicher to that tainus. So therefore, if you'll see clearly the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch's lashon, he's very cautious. He doesn't say there's that there was a chiyuv to fast. He says, Mistama, they fasted then, and Yigimel and Klal Yisrael was makabel upon themselves that day, because the idea of Tainus Esther is like a very old minig. It's a minig that goes all the way back to those times, but it's not explicit, clearly, not in Psukim and not in Chazal, that you have to fast the Tainus Esther. And that's much more lenient with it in certain situations. But the Shulchan Aruch says, even something is based on a minig, you're not supposed to separate from the community. This is a community thing. We fast. We all fast. Unless you have a good reason, we all fast. Just to point out something else that, the Rebbe one time wrote a letter to the Rebbe one time wrote a letter to someone, and the date of the letter, he wrote it on Tainus Esther. So on the top of the letter, it said Tainus Esther as the date. And on the bottom, the Rebbe had a footnote, and he asked a question. And he said, in the footnote, he asked a question, I don't know why it's called Tainus Esther. Doesn't make sense. What does it have to do with Esther? Esther, all the Klal Yisrael fasted. The Yidden went to war, they had to fast, and daven to Hashem, Tainus and Slichus, they should win the war. What does it have to do with Esther? Why are we calling this Tainus Esther? Now, the letter the Rebbe was planning to send it out. For some reason, there was a delay in the sending out of this letter. And by the time the Rebbe was holding, by sending out the actual letter, he already had thought of a certain answer to this question. So he added like a footnote on the footnote as that writing that, meanwhile the letter was delayed, and I have a certain thought to say to answer the shaila. And he says this as what he calls it l'chidudi. The chidudi more is sort of like comes the word l'chad, like a sharp answer, like a chap. He's not saying this is pshat, but he's saying l'chidudi, an answer as to why it's called Tainus Esther. And the Rebbe says like this: when Yidden go to war, really, anyone who goes to war, soldiers are not allowed to fast. They have to be strong. They can't be weak. It's usher for a soldier going to battle to fast. It's forbidden. They have to eat. They need to be strong. They can't be shvach. So who would fast when Klal Yisrael went to war? Those that stayed home and for whatever reason were not going to battle, were not in the part of the army, they fasted. They went into shul, daven slichas, and fasted for the brethren is on the battlefield. The soldiers don't fast. So the Rebbe in the times of Purim, there was no battlefield, there was no army. Klal Yisrael didn't have an army. It wasn't either Achashverosh's army against the Yidden. It was anti-Semites that were given permission via Haman and Achashverosh, a royal decree. They have a right to fight against the Yidden. When Achashverosh went and wrote a second letter, he could not repeal his first royal order because there was some Narish rule that you couldn't repeal the king's royal decrees from the past. So Achashverosh merely added an extra decree that the Yidden have the rights to defend themselves. Shkoyach. The Yidden had the rights to defend themselves against anti-Semites and to stand up against their neighbors and all the Amalekites that existed then. So really, no one knew what was going to be. No one knew until the battle actually, Yud Adar, came about. The day when Haman had made that goyrel. And Achashverosh had given that decree that the anti-Semites could fight with the Yidden. No one knew what would be the outcome, who would win. So there was no soldiers. We didn't have foot soldiers. Everyone had to fight against their neighbors. They had to fight against the anti-Semites around the corner from them. It wasn't Achashverosh's army that was fighting them. It was people, one person against person, that were fighting. No one knew exactly where the danger would be. No one was allowed to fast at that time. Seemingly, at halacha, historically, no one should have been allowed to fast and go to shul daven, because the guy can come to shul and attack you. Wherever you are, you got to be strong, you got to eat well, and you got to have weapons, and you got to fight. So said the Rebbe, no one was able to fast at that time. So what's pshat b'chlal that we have a zeicher tatainas then, when there was no differentiation between soldiers and people that stayed home? So therefore, the Rebbe says there was only one Jew that was able to fast then. There was only one Jew that was safe, and that was Esther. Esther was sitting in the royal palace. No one could touch her. She had royal security. It was better than the security at Mar-a-Lago. It was a serious security over there. So no one could touch Esther. So Esther was able to daven and to fast for the Yidden to win. But everyone else had to fight for their lives. And that's why the fast is called Tainus Esther, because only Esther fasted then. And our fast that we fast now is a zeicher to Esther's fast that she fasted on the day when the Yidden were battling with the Goyim. I want to point out there were fasts that Esther did ask. Tsumo alai, shloishis yamim laila v'yoyim. She did ask Mordechai that Klal Yisrael should fast for her 3 fasts, and she also said, "I and my girls will also fast before I go in to meet the king, to ask him to come to the meal and everything, the party." But those fasts, we don't have any zeicher for those fasts. The fast at Sumolai happened Nisan. You know that Esther was by Achashverosh Pesach night. Pesach night. And it says the Yidden fasted then. And Vayavar Mardchai, the Chazal say that the word Vayavar Mardchai was over on the Torah then. Klal Yisrael did not have a Pesach Seder that year. They fasted. There was no, what about a Seder? We might not be exist anymore. Yidden's existence was in danger. So Yidden fasted for their life. So they fasted those 3 days. Vayavar Mardchai abolished Pesach. There was no Seder. Forget about not eating chametz. They didn't eat nothing. No matzah, nothing. They didn't eat anything. But those fasts were Nisan time. Had nothing to do with the battle. The battle happened later on, almost a year later. 11 months later, on Yud Gimel Adar was when the battle happened. These fasts were different sets of fasts. They were fasts for the Hatzlach of Esther. We don't fast anything commemorating those fasts because they happened during Chodesh Nisan. During Chodesh Nisan, we're not supposed to fast. It's a joyous month. So historically, we don't fast in Chodesh Nisan. So we don't commemorate those 3 fasts. Our fast, the fast Yud Gimel Adar, that we're going to fast upcoming Monday, is in commemoration, zecher to the fact that Yidden fasted and davened to Hashem slichis when they went to battle. Yeah, clear?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so Siv Gimel, B'yoyim Yidalad Adar Hu Purim is Purim. V'imchal Purim Aleph. What happens when Purim falls out on a Sunday? When do we fast? We don't fast on Shabbos, and once we're moving it back, we don't either fast on a Friday. Magdimin Lisanas B'yim, we fast on Thursday. Reason being, because we don't want to fast on a day on Friday, come into Shabbos hungry. It's not coveted for Shabbos to come into Shabbos hungry. So since the fast is really supposed to be on Shabbos, you don't fast on Shabbos, and we're pushing it back anyways, move it back to Thursday. But by the way, when Asar B'Tevis falls on Friday, like it happened last year, when Asar B'Tevis falls on Shabbos, it's on Friday, it's Boy B'Yoim, you actually fast on a Friday. So it's not pshat that we never fast on a Friday. If the Tanis falls on a Friday, we fast on a Friday. Over here, the Tanis is supposed to be Shabbos, and we're going to move it back anyways. So move it back to Thursday because we don't want to come in hungry to Shabbos. Miesh oz bris mila. Yes, a sulbalai. If you have on a Tainus Esther, someone makes a bris. So Yael made it a week early, but next Monday we're gonna have Tainus Esther. Someone makes a bris on Tainus Esther. He makes the meal by night. Abba sandik v'avia ben b'ton lecha b'biyoyim vein sichim l'sanas biyoyim vav.
My other son, I made on kind of Esther. That was Thursday, Nitcha.
Oh
But it was
wow.
8 years ago, 9 years ago, yeah. 9 years ago.
Wow, so you had it all. So no, you fasted then,
No, Al Pialach, we didn't. We had a Suda,
right?
and then later on, yeah.
So here's the din. The sandik and the avia ben are allowed to eat, but the rest of the oilam obviously can't eat. So therefore, we make the suda at night. Did you make it the bris later in the day, or you made it early?
We made the bris by Shachris, and then we did the Suda by night.
Right. But you and here the Shulchan Aruch Kli writes you don't have to remake up that fast the next day on Friday. Although Adam Acher, you have another individual, Shashachar made a mistake on a Thursday when it was the Tainis Nidchi, he made a mistake and he ate because he didn't know the din. He forgot that it's Tainis Esther on Thursday. He should make it up on Friday. Siv Dali, the covenant Megillah Yishul Bishbek, the Shabbos Be'erev. Some people don't know this, but for the Megillah, you're supposed to wear Shabbos clothing. So those who wear whatever Shabbos suit they wear, Bekesha, Kapata, whatever you wear, Streimbel, that you come with that Friday, Monday night to Shul, you come with Shabbos clothing. When you come from Shul, somehow it's supposed to miraculously, you're supposed to have in your house a set table, a beautiful table with lit candles, nicely set up. Meaning you're supposed to have a little bit of a Suda the night. The Suda's Purim only Yotze by day. But you're supposed to have a little bit of a Suda by night, should be a little festive. You're coming home and also everyone's fasting. So you're coming home Monday night, should have a shtickle Suda. Arvis Lachash Ben Esrei, the Seder is Ma'ariv. And after Shemin Esrei, you say Kaddish Shalom to Skabel. According to somebody, you read the Megillah before Aleinu. After the Megillah, you at the Kaddish. The reason why you say V'ata Kaddish, like he says in the parentheses, Shehu Mizmer Lamatzeach Aleilas Shachar, because the pasuk V'ata Kaddish Yesh Dil Yisrael is in Kapitel Chaf Beis, which is Al Yalas Shachar, which Chazal tell us is a capital which discusses Esther. The Sham Nemer, that pasuk in that capital also says, "Alakai Ekar, I will call out to you night and day, Hashem." And Chazal say that's referring to Mikra Megillah, that we call out by night, we read it by night and by day. The Amar Vishum Alevi Chayv on Likas Megillah by Laila Shemay Sabiyim Shem Kayak Yomam V'Lei Sana V'Laila Dimili. With some of Atakosh is the next pasuk. So we have a capital talks about Esther, and there's a remes to the Megillah there, and the next pasuk is V'ata Kaddish. So we say the whole V'ata Kaddish, just like we do on Matzah Shabbos, we say it on the Purim night. V'yacha we say Kaddish, Shalom beloy to Skabel, because you already said to Skabel. Mitzvah Shabbos, you would say V'hinoyim when Purim falls out on Sunday. Matzah Shabbos, after Megillah, you would say V'hinoyim V'ata Kaddish, Kaddish Shalom, without the Skabel, Yitim L'cha, Mavdilan Al-Kois, the Havdalah, and Aleinu. Sif Hey. Noigin litin koidem Purim asam nadeya hakavua ba'isim mokim ba'isis man zeichel matzach shohay noisim ba'adal okselech hakabanas at sibur minig litin gimel machzir shemix parshas kisisok se gimel pa'amim teruma. So basically, the minig is it's a minig. It's not a chiyuv. The minig is to give machzah shekel like they did in the Zman of the Mikdash. We give a half of the currency that you have. So in America, it's a $50 coin, which is not really in currency now, but we have people bring from what they have, and the minig is to try to get silver. It's not mentioned in Shulchan Aruch, so therefore we try to get silver $50 coins. Currencies that don't have half of their currency. Some currencies don't have a half a coin that's a half. So they use, let's say, the $50 because the dollar is a currency that works around the world. And also the minig is to give gimel matzah 3 half coins. So the actual minig is 1 coin, and the extra minig is to do silver and 3 silver halves. If you don't have, you do what you could. To commemorate the 3 times it says the word truma, donation, in the pasuk. And v'noisim bad you give in the evening lefnei kriyas Megillah. So we do it before mincha, Montinus Esther, Machalkon ois laniyim, and you distribute the money to aniyim. Some say you give it to a shul, as a zecher to the Beis Hamikdash. That's another shita. A cotton is potter to give. V'im aviv nasim eshvil pamach chayiv la'olam. If a father gave for his son one time, he should always give for him till he's bar mitzvah, and he's going to do it on his own. Ben you give shem the chayev, shem the pat sheben asim. There's a machloikis whether you're supposed to give a shekel 13 years of age or 20. Why is there machloikis? Like all mitzvahs we do at bar mitzvah, why is there a sheet that holds 20? Because matzah shekel actually was only given in the times of the Torah and the Beis Hamikdash by those that were 20 years old, between 20 and 60. Well, it was the age of the army, and they gave a half a shekel. Those were the men that were counted from 20 to 60, and therefore there's a svara to say only from 20 years old you should give. Lamaisa, the minig is like this. The minig is everyone gives matzah shekel. The minig is the father gives for all those that are under bar mitzvah. He gives including for his wife, and gives for all children. And not only that, even the minig is to give, even if the mother is pregnant, to give for the pregnant, give for the baby, the stomach. There's a remez said in Paskin for that. It says, "Kol ha'oiver ala pakudim, kol ha'uber ala pakudim." That even any uber, any baby in the womb, also we give because it's basically a kapara, l'chapa nafshisechem, it's a concept of kapara, and when it comes to kapara, we want to be mechaper for everyone. But once the boy reaches bar mitzvah and he's giving on his own masa shekel, the father does not need to give for him masa shekel because he's giving. Just if he started giving when he's younger, he should continue giving until he reaches bar mitzvah. I'll point out that we have to. It's getting late, but to point out some important halachis. Um, Kriyas HaMegillah, I just always like to mention this every year. You're supposed to hear every word. Sometimes, for some reason, someone has a gragger or whatever it might be. There's a baby crying, and you missed a word or two. Read it in the Chumash or the Megillah that you have in front of you. Read it over there, and you're fine, because Abediyeved, you're allowed to read the Megillah, parts of the Megillah Baal Peh, without a Megillah. Obviously, l'chatchila we're supposed to read every word in a Megillah, but the halach is that Kriyas a Megillah, if majority is read inside, you're yoitza the minority of the Megillah, reading it Baal Peh. And so if you read it from a Chumash, which is considered Baal Peh because you don't have a Megillah, you're yoitza. So whoever it might be, woman or man, everyone is chayiv in hearing Megillah. They should make sure they're following along with a Chumash, with Nekudis, and if you have a Megillah, you have a Megillah, and if you miss words, read it inside the Chumash and catch up to where the Baal Koyer is holding, and you're good. You're good to go. No need to hear the Megillah again. There's certain Maila that those who are using a Chumash over those who are using a Megillah, because if you have there's a Maila in each. If you have a Megillah and you read the words in the Megillah, it's l'chatchila because you didn't do anything Baal Peh. If you missed words from the Baal Koyer, you read it yourself in your Megillah. So you combined with your reading and with the Baal Koyer, you read it inside. So you're yaitz l'chatchila. So obviously that's best. However, what happens if you're not a Baal Koyer and you have a Megillah in front of you and you miss some words and you want to catch up? You don't know how to read the words because there's no nekudis in the Megillah. So there's a ma'ila having a chumash, on the other hand, that there, if you're able to read the words in the Chumash, if you don't know the Nekudis, and some of the words are difficult in the Megillah, you can read it in there and you yaitza b'diavad. Another common mistake that people make is that they think that you have to have two different brachas in the Mishleich Manis. As much as we talk about this, I feel that people uh, fall for this again and again. There's no halacha requiring having two brachas. You're allowed to have two shahakals as your Mishleich Manis. Obviously, it's not really negeya for most Mishleich Manis have tons of food in there in brachas, so not such a shaila. But maybe for a child, or if you're giving actually maybe like a chashav, a bottle of wine, not wine, let's say some type of a bottle of mashke, and you're giving a meat, let's say you're giving a board of cold cuts with a bottle of liquor to someone as a shayach manis, even the both shahakal yaitza, because it's two minin, beis minin, two different types. So it's two different types. It's not two different brachas. Brachas can be the same. And mishloach manis min adin, you only need to give to one person. And obviously, call hamar behareza meshubach to give extra, but you only min adin need to give one person. They say the Rebbe used to give to three people, Koyin Levi Yisrael, but that was the Rebbe's personal minig. It's not a chiyuv. And the matanas of Yoinim, it says plural form, gives to the poor in plural form. Matanas of Yoinim, you're supposed to give to two poor people. And preferably the matanas of Yoinim should be given that day. If you're able to, should be given to someone who gives to that day. And obviously there it's more Kol HaMa'abar Reis and Meshubach as much as you can give to tzedakah to people on Purim. That's the Iker Matanas of Yoinim. And yeah, at Khan for this, I want to point out that the Poskim bring out that there's a chiluk between Chanukah and Purim. Chanukah, there's no chiv of a suda. We latkes, we have donuts, but there's no chiv of having a meal. We have a festive meal in Purim, a real proper meal, a suda. We wash, we have meat, we have a real suda. The Poskim can point out the reason is like this: the lavush, the taz, because the whole mess of Chanukah, even though there was a battle, but we were fighting for a ruchnistic Yeshua. They were battling us not physically. They didn't want to destroy us. They wanted us to stop being religious. So the celebration is more of a religious celebration. We light candles but not physical. However, Purim, we're celebrating our salvation, physical salvation. We were going to be killed, wiped out. And that celebration, we celebrate physically. The physical issue is physical by eating and drinking, giving out Mashiach Manis, and Pasha being happy in a physical way to commemorate the physical miracle that we celebrate. So we should be Zayche to have this year that we should also have a Yeshua from the Haman of Zmanenu, for the Malekim that we have for Zmanenu. And just like we had then, and those who recall in 1991, we also had the win over the Persian Gulf over when Saddam was threatening Eretz Yisrael, and the war was won on Purim. On Purim Day, it was a Purim miracle, and the Rebbe had actually had said it would finish on Purim. And over here, we hope that the Yidden will have Elihudim v'Sa'ira v'Simcha v'Sasa v'Ikar for all the Klal Yisrael, Begashmias, Betoiv, Anira open and revealed good, Bekarev Mamish. Should be a Freilich Purim, and it's beautiful to see. We actually have a minyan on the Zoom. We can make a minyan over here.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good night.
A Freilich Purim, everyone. A Freilich Purim.
We'll see you after Purim.
Good to see you.
Thanks so much.
Pinchas, now you're like all of us. We're all online. We're all on Zoom together.
Very good.
Good to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Should we have Freilich Purim and a good Chodesh.